Okay, amazing. Okay, so let's continue our discussion of positivity bias. We didn't finish last time chapter 2, so we're gonna go ahead and finish chapter 2 and then dive into chapter 3. So in chapter 2, actually the whole chapter was on dwelling on the positive, on taking pause and really focus and don't not let it just you know, go by. We have these things that happen, but really cementing it into our consciousness. And now he's going to specifically talk about gratitude. So he tells us like this. He says, choose gratitude. And he gives us a story. It's a beautiful story about Rav David Shochet, when Rabbi Shochet, who later became the president of the Council of Orthodox Rabbis of Toronto, when he had his first audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1952, as a young man who had enrolled in the Central Lubavitch Yeshiva in Brooklyn. What he remembers the most from that initial meeting was the Rebbe's guidance on actively appreciating life. And look at what the Rebbe told him. It's so beautiful. The Rebbe said to this young man, don't take life for granted. In the morning, when you wake up, thank God for everything that has been given to you. Many people go to sleep at night, and when they wake up in the morning, they expect their shoes to be by their bed where they left them the night before. As they're getting dressed, they complain that the weather is too cold or too hot. Instead, they should be grateful that they are still alive, that their possessions are still with them, that a new day is beginning where they have an opportunity to do many good deeds. You know, the Rebbe here is talking about that we take things completely for granted as though it was a given. No, it's not a given. You know, like Michael Safdie says in his Daily Bitachon WhatsApp, I think he quotes Rabbi Broch that says that when we wake up in the morning, we should have like a 10-piece orchestra, you know, saying thank you that we're here again. And so he says, Rabbi Shochet says that this was a lesson that he never forgot. So it's important to remember, as we explored previously, that the Rebbe spent time as a refugee fleeing across Europe and the Atlantic Ocean during World War II. So again, he knew firsthand what it meant to lose almost everything. For him to be able to give this advice after experiencing such horrors speaks volumes of his belief and commitment to this practice of actively invoking and dwelling on the positive. So again, this idea of bringing it to consciousness and dwelling on it, cementing it in our consciousness. Indeed, the Rebbe saw the cultivation of an attitude of gratitude as a pillar of Jewish consciousness and spiritual practice. Now, there's a beautiful story that he's going to tell us here about the Rebbe's favorite prayer. And it goes like this. There was a boy, Rab Nachum Stillerman, when he was a 9-year-old boy, he had a job, and his job was, he grew up in Grand Heights, and what he did is he used to deliver groceries to community members. And one of those community members was the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Tzimchana. So he used to deliver groceries to Rebbe Tzimchana, and Rebbe Tzimchana happened to have a very in Spanish we say jovial personality, like a very friendly personality. And she was always very kind to him, and she would often invite him in for a glass of milk, a cookie, and whatever. And on one of these occasions, this 9-year-old boy mustered the courage to ask the Rebbe, the Rebbetzin, Chana, the Rebbe's mother, Rebbetzin, what is the Rebbe's favorite prayer? And she said, that's a really good question. I actually don't know. But when I see the Rebbe next, I will ask on your behalf. I will find out what is the Rebbe's favorite prayer. So lo and behold, when Rebbe Tzimchana saw the Rebbe, which the Rebbe, by the way, took the time to visit his mother every single day. Once they came back from when he brought her back from Paris, they had been separated for 15 years. And from that point on, he visited his mother every day, even though the Rebbe was such a busy, busy person. So in the next occasion that the Rebbetzin saw the Rebbe, she asked the Rebbe, so when the boy came the next week to deliver the groceries for Rebbe Tzimchana, she told him, I'm so happy to tell you that I have an answer for your question. And the answer is It's a very short prayer. It's the first prayer that we say in the morning. Mode ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechachazarta bi nishmati bechem la rabba emunasecha. I offer thanks to you, living and eternal King, for you have restored my soul within you. With mercy within me, not within you, within me with mercy. Your faithfulness is great. And the boy was like, "That's it, that's the Rebbe's favorite prayer." It was such a lesson because you would expect that for somebody like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a favorite prayer would be, the Shema, Shmone Esrei, something within Shmone Esrei, some Kabbalistic something, some deep something that we say maybe for Shabbat. I don't know, right? But like this Modeh Ani is such a short prayer. It's just 12 words and it doesn't even have God's name in it. We don't even say it after preparation. We say it when we wake up. We're still in bed. We haven't gotten dressed. We haven't formally started our day. So you would think that one of the Rebbe's favorite prayer would be something a little bit more elaborate and sophisticated, but no, that's his favorite prayer. That was the Rebbe's favorite prayer, which really signals to the cardinal importance that the Rebbe attributed to actively focusing one's attention on the gift of life and making this appreciation the cornerstone of one's consciousness. And it's important to note here also, when we talk about this active appreciation and not taking things for granted, right? And this, as I said before, like cementing this in our consciousness, that in Judaism, we utter these prayers. Like prayer is something that is uttered, it's said. It's not like wake up in the morning and think grateful thoughts and think gratitude. No. Open your lips and say the words, right? Again, so it's from thought to action, right? That is already like becomes a lot more real. Okay, so then now he continues with the vessels for blessing. One final point that he wants to make here, that he says is worth making, is that from the Rebbe's perspective, dwelling on the positive is not just about generating a feeling of psychological well-being. That for sure, right? But it's not just about that. It is also an actual investment in our future. Look at why. And for the world that's obsessed with like this idea of abundance and manifesting and all that, which is an important idea, but again, it goes back to Torah, okay, as we're going to see, and we've seen it in many instances, especially as all of this class is related to the topic of bitachon, which really is this manifesting that the world talks about, okay? So it's not just about the fact that we're going to feel better. It's going to be better for our mental and emotional health to be grateful individuals, but from the Rebbe's perspective, it's an investment in our future because according to Hasidic philosophy, the words and feelings of gratitude that we express to God, the Creator, and this is very important, okay? As Yidden, we can't get sucked into the universe or nature or spirit or who knows what the world calls these forces. No, it's God, the Creator of the world. Let's call it what it is, okay? Let's acknowledge what it is. It's not anything else but God, the Creator of the world, okay? So when we express gratitude to God for the blessings we already have in our lives, so for the blessings we already have in our lives, those actually become the vessels and the vehicle for new blessings and abundance to flow into our lives. So when we take the time to express gratitude for what the blessings that we have here right now at this moment in our lives, those blessings that we are expressing gratitude for now become the vessels and the vehicles for us to receive more. That's what creates the abundance. That's what's activating the flow. The fact that you're able to appreciate what you have right now, because in a certain sense, the expression of gratitude in the presence begets what to be grateful for in the future. Okay, when you tell Hashem, thank you for this, you're telling Hashem, I can receive more. I'm appreciative of more, right? When you have somebody, a child that comes to you and says, thank you, mommy, for that trip that you took me on, you know that you are going to want to take the child again on such a trip, right? So it creates the vessel for more for the person to have in the future. So it's not just about what we create right now in terms of our well-being, but it's literally an investment in our future. It's really the creating the channel for the abundance that's to come in our lives. Okay. So now he's going to tell us, similar to what we discussed last week, where the Rebbe speaks very firmly to people who are, in this case, what we're about to read is not expressing appreciation for what they have in their life. And the Rebbe is going to be very strong and use very strong language to steer them away from that tendency. So in response to a strongly worded letter written by someone who bitterly complained that they lacked any positive aspects in their life due to their myriad struggles, the Rebbe wrote the following. He said, I'm not implying that one is supposed to struggle for a living or not enjoy perfect health, God forbid. My point is that perhaps the reason for your weak health and your difficulties in earning a living is your failure to appreciate God's blessings to you in a far more basic matter than perfect health and abundance. And what could be a far more basic matter than health and abundance? The Rebbe says, the blessings of sons and daughters who follow the ways of God. So because you're not appreciating something so fundamental that a person needs to acknowledge appreciation for such a huge fundamental blessing of having children who follow, multiple children who follow in the ways of God, the Rebbe is suggesting that that failure to be totally grateful and cognizant and humbled with that blessing is lacking that appreciation is what's stopping the flow for the rest of the blessings that this person claims he's lacking. Okay, so that's pretty strong. When the Rebbe continues and says, when one does not recognize the explicit good bestowed on them from above, particularly when one's lack of recognition is so extreme that it results in statements such as you express in your letter, is it any wonder that more blessings are not forthcoming from above in other matters? Are we really shocked that if we're not actively acknowledging what we have been blessed with right now, is it any wonder that more's not coming? Right? Why should we give? Why should God give to somebody who is not looking at him and saying, thank you, right? So again, it's inner work. It starts with us. So the Rebbe says, my hope is that these few lines will suffice to open your eyes to see your situation in its true light. So it's very interesting. The words of the Rebbe is true light. The true light is that these are really, really important blessings that you should be thanking God for, and that is the channel for you to receive more blessings. And the reason you're not receiving those other blessings is because you're not even stopping to thank God for what he is giving you up until now. And when you begin to serve God with a true and inner joy, surely God will increase his blessings also in regard to health and sustenance, which is what this person had been saying that he's stuck on, like he's not getting that. Okay. And so again, to everybody who's into the theme of abundance, right? It's right here. It's fundamental Judaism, right? There is abundance. God has everything. And as we learned the Shar B'tachon, God is extremely kind. And by the way, sometimes he's because he's extremely kind to the deserving and the undeserving, as it says in Shar B'tachon. Somebody asked me that question. What about people who don't have B'tachon? What about people who, how come they have? Because God doesn't stop the flow. And as we learned there, by the way, it's not only that God doesn't stop the flow, is also that, as we learned there, the test of wealth, sometimes for those people, that is a real test. And that might even, in the words of Shar B'tachon, might even come to become the cause of their distress or their downfall, etc. Okay. So in other words, don't look at other people, work on yourself. Don't tell me when we're talking about working on bitachon, well, but what about those other people, right? Those other people who either didn't get, or those people who get a lot, but they don't have bitachon. How does that work? Look, We're not here to calculate how it works, how does it work for everybody else. We're here to understand how Yiddishkeit says it's going to work for us, and we have the Torah to tell us. We're not here to calculate why God has certain accounting with other people. Okay, so we've talked about this numerous times inside the Shara B'tachon. So I sort of deviated, but I'm going to go back to our text. So now we're going to go into another letter. So in this new letter, the Rebbe makes a similar point to an individual by highlighting the importance of expressing appreciation to God for the blessings one has in one's life already before asking for more. So before we ask, right? Appreciating. And if you notice the structure of prayer, right? If you really take time to acknowledge what we're doing, is a whole preparation to even stand up on our feet and ask Hashem for all the blessings, material and health and right and wealth and time to enjoy it and all that, right? All of that is preceded by lengthy words of appreciation and acknowledgement, right? And as we've said many times, there's a lot of language of bitachon in all those words, right? Okay, so here the Rebbe says, obviously, you must pray that God fulfill all your needs from his full hand, right? We always say from your full hand, but it must be preceded by thankfulness for his abundant kindness to you, because already, again, we learned it inside the Shara B'tachon. Hashem is the first attribute is his kindness. It's a constant kindness. Seventh attribute is extremely generous to the deserving and the undeserving. And then we have all the other attributes, attentive and has a solid track record and, wise and all the things. Okay. But here we're talking about the abundant kindness that he's constantly bestowing upon us. And so asking needs to be preceded with that recognition. It's so interesting because I think I told you guys before, but when I was in a JLI panel, I was moderating a panel of philanthropists, and the topic of that panel happened to have been education. And beautiful Mrs. Ganevish said, I'm telling you, this is the definition of real wealth. We were talking about education. And she said, we came to this country, well, to Canada. We came to with nothing. Literally, my husband came to this country with nothing. We had very humble beginnings. And we had 6 children, Kenai Nahara. And today we have 110 great grandchildren, all following the path of Torah. And it's like, that's it right there. Mic drop, right? Like, what are we talking about? That's real wealth. That is real wealth right there, right? And this is what the Rebbe was telling this other individual, the letter that we read before, right? How can you not recognize, like, that is the real wealth? Appreciate that, and God will take care of everything else. But we have to start with a recognition. This is why this exercise I was sharing yesterday, again, I think I've told you before, I'm going to share it again, because every time I've told people recently, everybody's just like so excited about the exercise. And it goes like this. I think I told you before, I'm going to say it again because I'm finding that it's really resonating with people. Maybe it's because I'm excited about it. I don't know, but it goes like this. Basically, every morning, this is something I do. I started doing it in Adar. I learned it from I joined a group, like my friend, her sisters organized this group, the Adar Joy Challenge. Sure, I'm game. Let's do it. Okay. So it went like this. Okay. And I do it in the morning. In the morning, you take a piece of paper, you take your journal, and you put on top your joy rating. Okay. From 1 to 100%, you're 80%, 90%, 92%, 70%, whatever it is. Okay. You put your thing. Okay. I'm 89%. Perfect. Then you split your paper in 2 columns. And on the left-hand column, you write challenges I have in my life, things that are challenging in my life, things that are challenging in my life, colon, and you go and you start. Okay, my back is hurting, my oven's broken, the insurance company didn't give me enough money for the flooding in the kitchen, for the repairs. My kid is having a struggle in school with a teacher, and I haven't found a high school for my child. My cleaning lady, I need whatever. Okay, whatever is going on, all the challenges, right? And then in the right side, in the next column, in the other column on the right side, you write good things in my life column, the good things that are happening in my life. And of course, you start obviously with, your health and my children, and my husband, and my mother, and my conversation yesterday with my sister, and the AC in my house, and the sunlight in my kitchen, and the fact that I have food in my fridge, and the nice coffee that I'm drinking while I'm or tea while I'm doing this exercise, and that I have a comfortable bed, and it was just really nice to get up this morning, all the good things, everything. And as you're doing all these, and I call them micro gratitudes, right? Because you start really getting deeper, like you should, right? If you're doing a gratitude exercise, you're looking at the good in your life, it should go beyond the typical my family, my health. No, like let's talk right now. No, the fact that look at the nice color of this new pen that I bought. It's my favorite blue color. And look at whatever, all the things, right? And you start going through your list of all your little things that you're grateful for. Then they're not so little, they're really big, right? But it's important to like get to the minutia, to the micro gratitudes. And inevitably, guys, we are going to see that the good things in our life, the list is going to be so much longer than the challenges. And I know we all have challenges, and sometimes the challenges are humongous and they're daunting. But if we really, really, really take the time, okay, to adopt a positivity bias, which is what this journey is taking us on, we are going to see that there is so much more good. Like Rabbi Moshe Gersh told me on the podcast one time, it's like, in order for you to complain about the one thing that's going off wrong in your life, 99% of things have to be going right. Like, do you realize? It's like, yeah, it's true, right? Everything else has to be going right for you to even be able to complain about the one thing that's going wrong. So anyway, so inevitably you're going to see that the column of good things in your life is much longer than the column of negative things. And not only that, what happens then is that you rate your joy again. Now at the bottom of the page, and sometimes the page is double-sided because you're continuing your columns, right? And hopefully you're continuing the gratitude column, the good things column. So afterwards, at the bottom, you put your joy rating. And inevitably, what's going to happen is that your percentage points is going to go up. So if you were 89%, by the end of the exercise, most likely you'll be 93, 95, 98. I don't know. But it's become, among all of us who practice this exercise, a truth that after we do it, obviously we do feel much more joyful, right? Because now we are much more focused on the positive. So it's a very nice way for those who like journaling, for those who like gratitude, and it doesn't take so long. It's very fast. It's not like a long journaling exercise, and it's actually very, very powerful. And it does what we're talking about in this chapter, the chapter on dwelling on the positive. What is doing it's acknowledging the good, what we have that is so amazing that we have to express so much gratitude for. It's really cementing that into our consciousness, bringing our awareness towards that. Okay, so here he says, if we want more good in our lives and in the world, we must actively acknowledge and deeply integrate the positive aspects of life that we are already experiencing and be grateful to God who provides that good. To do this, we must counter the natural tendency to focus on the negative aspects of life surrounding us, because the natural tendency, like we said, is to focus on the list of challenges, right? That list is like, oh, right? But if you take a pause and focus on the good things, that's really, really powerful. We're beating that tendency to focus on the negative. Not that we should blind ourselves to the many threats and dangers in our midst, but we must learn to actively dwell. This is the key, to actively dwell on the positive that we do possess, so that we are not overwhelmed by constant anxiety and feelings of lack. Again, speaking to all those who are into the theme of abundance, and feelings of lack, which block the flow of blessings that God wants to funnel into our lives. Heartful appreciation opens the gates for God's abundance. Okay, so again, that's why gratitude. And it's in our name. Like, that's who we are. We are supposed to become people throughout our lives that refine ourselves to really, really become extremely grateful people, right? And this is exactly why the Chachamim gave us 100 blessings to say that there's so much for us to cultivate this, but we have to actually bring ourselves to do it with consciousness, like really, really understand that this is really, really important. Okay. So now we're going to go into chapter 3. Chapter 3 is going to be pleasure or purpose. And here we're going to start with Viktor Frankl, and he's going to take us to 1960 in Vienna. with Viktor Frankl. Everybody probably's read Man's Search for Meaning. So the world famous author and psychologist, he was ready to uproot his whole life, his research, his clinical practice, his family, and move to Australia. Having survived the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust, emerging from the ashes of Auschwitz with an unorthodox and daring theory of human psychology, it was revolutionary, very, very revolutionary. He could no longer endure the constant derision of his life's work by his colleagues in the field. I don't know if you guys know the story, but he was berated. He was losing tremendous amount of respect because what he was saying was just a revolutionary concepts. Frankl's view of human nature differed in certain key areas from the party line Freudian views that dominated the discipline of psychology after the war, making him and his work a constant target of public scholarly ridicule. So he was being mocked, and he got to a point where he just could not handle it. Like, it was just too hard a fight to fight. It was this very diminution of his deepest held beliefs regarding the inner makeup of the human being that was the last straw. He could survive the attacks of the Nazis on his body, but he could no longer bear the attacks of his peers on his soul, because this was something that he knew so deeply, that was so important for the world to know, what he had understood about human nature, human psychology, and how it could change people's lives. And indeed, he went to do it. And now we're going to see how this turned around, that he was just broken. So what he's saying is, like, like the Nazis couldn't break him, but this idea of that he couldn't fulfill his purpose because he was just every door was being closed on him. He was just ready to abandon the whole career, leave Europe, move to Australia, start from scratch, and forget the whole thing. It was at that moment when Marguerite Kozin-Chayes, I don't know how to pronounce the name, a well-known opera singer and descendant of Vizhn's Hasidim, knocked on his door in Vienna. When Dr. Frankl came to the door, he found a sharply dressed woman whom he had never met before standing on his doorstep. She announced herself as the bearer of a personal message addressed to him by a Hasidic Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson from Brooklyn, New York. Upon hearing this startling explanation for her visit and recognizing the name of the Rebbe, Dr. Frankl promptly invited Mrs. Chayes, I guess, inside to speak privately. And so she tells him, "The Rebbe asked me to tell you that you must not give up. You must be strong. Do not be disturbed by those who ridicule you. You will succeed and your work will achieve a major breakthrough." Can you imagine Dr. Frankl hearing these words? Like, how does the Rebbe even know? Upon hearing this reassuring voice from afar, Dr. Frankl broke into tears. Dispirited, he had just recently been filling out his immigration papers to Australia. He had given up, but the Rebbe's words of encouragement brought Dr. Frankl back to life. After regaining his composure, Dr. Frankl responded vigorously with a renewed commitment to continue his life's work, and indeed he did. Following this fateful meeting, Dr. Frankl redoubled his efforts in spreading his unique insights and therapeutic approaches to healing the human psyche. Not long afterwards, his magnum opus, everybody's read, right? I think it's the most widely translated book in the world or something like that. Man's Search for Meaning was translated into English, sparking immediate popular interest in his work and worldview that has continued to this very day. That work alone has been translated into 28 languages and sold over 10 million copies, giving birth to an entire genre of self-help literature, as well as the field of logotherapy, Frankl's unique philosophy and practice of psychological health and healing. So it's really, really incredible that thanks to the Rebbe helping Viktor Frankl not give up on his purpose, he was able to give us this gift. So history tells us that Viktor Frankl went on to become one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. He lived through the hell of the Holocaust and nevertheless found the strength to put forth an inspiring view of the human psyche that diverged in fundamental ways from the accepted norms of his time. But why was the Rebbe so concerned with Dr. Frankl and particularly with the fate of his work? There were plenty of Jewish psychologists at the time. Freud himself was Jewish. What was it about Dr. Frankel's view of human psyche, of the human psyche, that so piqued the Rebbe's interest and attracted his personal attention and support? The answer to answer that question, Rabbi Kalmenson tells us that we must dig deeper into the beginnings of psychoanalysis itself. And so here we go. In the 1920s, Viktor Frankl was awarded. He was a prized student of Sigmund Freud. He was a student of Freud. Okay. Indeed, from the very inception of the field of psychoanalysis, Frankl was an early adopter and gifted adept of Freud's radical theories and practices. However, after a time, their ideas about the shape and the substance of human nature began to diverge. So they went different directions. They weren't seeing eye to eye anymore. Where Freud saw the cornerstone of human consciousness as a purely self-serving pleasure principle, like we are pleasure-driven individuals, Frankl saw the soul's potential to transcend the limitations of the self through a search for meaning and deeds of loving kindness, right? And that was his whole experience in Auschwitz, that he understood that it was that commitment to purpose, something that gave a person purpose, that gave the ability for a person to survive even the harshest, most horrible conditions. And when a person lost that, that's when they couldn't survive anymore. This fundamental rift between their perspectives only grew wider and more profound over the years. So Sigmund Freud, having passed away in 1939, was never forced to face the ultimate inhumanity of the Holocaust. One can only imagine how that might have complicated or clarified his initial insights into the psychic nature of the humankind. Viktor Frankl, on the other hand, survived Auschwitz. He heard its terrible sounds and saw its dark visions. He tasted its putrid waters and smelled its rotten corpses, but he also witnessed miraculous deeds of utter selflessness and caring. If Freud were in the concentration camps, Frankl wrote, he would have changed his position. Beyond the basic natural drives and instincts of people, he would have encountered the human capacity for self-transcendence. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Very, very powerful. And so it is in this context of this horrible concentration camp that Frankl came to refine and crystallize his earlier intuitions concerning this underlying realities of human psychology that were not just self-serving individuals, that we can transcend the ego, that we can transcend the self. Once the war was over, now he had seen it with his own eyes, this capacity in humanity, Dr. Frankl could not avoid the inevitable collision with the founding principles and devoted followers of his former teacher. The root of their conflict cuts right to the heart of what constitutes the core of a person. In their own way, they each sought to uncover what's underneath it all, what lies hidden within our psychic depths beneath the masks we show the world. They both wanted to know what truly drives human behavior. Who are we really, right? What makes us tick? What is it? What drives us? In response to these questions, both Freud and Frankl posited the existence of a stratified structure of human consciousness, meaning that each human contains multiple levels of awareness, including, of course, the unconscious regions of the psyche that exert primal influences upon our behavior and express themselves in mysterious ways through dreams and language. The difference between their views lies in their respective diagnoses of what ultimately is at the root of our psyche, what compromises our most essential self. What did Freud teach? He taught that at our core, we each possess what he called the id, which is a completely unconscious and impulsive portion of the psyche that operates based on the pleasure principle and is the source of basic appetites and drives, always seeking immediate pleasure and gratification. Dr. Frankl, on the other hand, completely disagreed because he saw another reality. He felt that Freud and his colleagues reduced the human being to a mere mechanical creature, depriving him of his true essence. So there had to be something more. He believed that people are primarily driven by a striving to find meaning in one's life. That is the call of the soul. That is the soul, like really, really saying, I'm here for something, right? Beneath that ego, like Freud just stopped at one layer, but under that, we all have that ego that is just, kind of, it's just wants instant gratification. But beneath all that, there's a yid, not an id, there's a yid, right? There's a soul, it's a neshama, that piece of God that wants to strive higher, right? What does it mean, strive higher? He wants to do exactly the will of God. He wants to do something in this world that is completely unique, completely transcendent, revolutionary, of import, change the world, right? So he's saying that the human beings are primarily driven by a striving to find meaning in one's life. Hence the title of his best-selling book, Man's Search for Meaning. The fundamental difference of opinion between Freud and Frankl concerning what lies at the root of the human psyche is beautifully encapsulated in a conversation between the Rebbe and a well-known professor who complained to the Rebbe about the twisted nature of people. So here we go. Let's see what this conversation is about. And by the way, there's a very cute video where when eventually there was the first shliach who was sent, I forget his name, that was sent to Vienna. I think he gets a call one day from this woman. She passed away in the year 2000. The woman that the Rebbe had sent to Vienna to talk to Frankl, and she says, "No, you're not the first shliach to Vienna. I was the first shlucha to Vienna." And she tells him the story. Now it all started to make sense to him because he never knew why he used to get a monthly check. It wasn't a big check, but a monthly check of a donation from Viktor Frankl, who had never stepped foot in the Chabad house or anything. And this was the reason, because he had a debt of gratitude to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Isn't that a crazy story? Okay, so from my encounters in life, I have noticed that people might seem nice and charming at the outset. They may express concern for you, show interest in your life, and even openly admit that they love you. But if one digs just a little deeper than the outer surface, some require more digging than others. At their core, everyone is exactly the same: selfish, arrogant, and egotistical. Why is this the nature of mankind? Right? That's the question that somebody posed to the Rebbe. Like, look, we're just at the end of the day, yeah, superficially, we're nice. We could take care of each other. We can even love, say we love each other. But come on, when we get to the basics, we really are just like selfish animals, right? So, what's going on here? So look at what the Rebbe answers to this man. He says with a parable, he says, when one walks on the street, things often look so elegant and appealing: tall flowery trees, fancy houses, paved roads, and expensive cars. But if one takes a shovel and begins digging beneath the surface, he discovers dirt and mud, and nothing like the beautiful but deceptive world above the ground. At this point, the professor was nodding his head in agreement. But if he weren't to give up, and he would continue digging deeper, the Rebbe said, he would eventually encounter precious minerals and diamonds. So the Rebbe acknowledged the fact that beneath the surface of people's outward personalities, there often lies a much less flattering psychic reality. That's true. However, we got to dig even deeper. The Rebbe further stressed that beneath all that dirt and mud that's there is something deeper, something beautiful and holy. There is a soul. There is a yid. It's not an id, it's a yid. Okay? There's a soul. This is precisely why the Rebbe took such a strong interest in Dr. Frankl and his work. Frankl's view of the human psyche corresponded quite closely with that of Hasidic understanding. We have a soul beneath the surface of the self. So this was too important. The Rebbe understood that disseminating this type of work to the masses was of tremendous import, like to people to understand that they are actually beneath all the meshugas that we have, that we are really people that can transcend and do incredible things in the world, that we can have real import and real meaning and purpose. It can be life-changing. So of course the Rebbe wanted Dr. Frankl to continue his work. Can you imagine if he hadn't? We have a soul beneath the surface of the self. This soul forms the very core of our being and connects us to other souls and to a higher power. activation of this core point within is what allows us to transcend our baser nature and become a force for good in the world. And so this is why, at the end of the day, what Hasidus helps us to do is to really relate to that part of us, because you can go through your whole life, even as a Jewish individual, and unfortunately be more relate more to your animalistic side, and not just to your physical body, but just as the psyche, and not have the awareness that you're something that transcends even all of that, that you're really, in essence, you're not a soul with a body, you're really a body with a soul. So beneath all the meshugas and the needs of the body and the meshugas of the brain, of the mind, really there is a core essence of you that is who you are, right? That's who you are. And so Hasidus is always trying to point us to identify with that area of us. And really all of Judaism should be that. Every act of connecting to our Creator, every mitzvah is really for us to light up that awareness, right? Because what we're doing is we're plugging in. So every time we're plugging in, if we have the right consciousness, what we're doing is we're sensitizing ourselves to that energy that we have within us, that godly energy, that godly spark. Throughout the years following this initial motivating message to Dr. Frankl, the Rebbe wrote admiringly about Frankl's approach. He said, "It is obvious that some doctors have helped and healed their patients in straight ways, especially since one Professor Frankl found the courage in his soul to declare and announce that, contrary to the opinion of the famous founder of psychoanalysis, Freud, faith in God and a religious inclination in general, which gives meaning to life, etc., is one of the most effective ways of healing." And if anyone wants to actually learn more about that, all of the work of Dr. Lisa Miller, for example, The Spiritual Child, and what's the other one? Anyway, just look up Dr. Lisa Miller's work. It's all exactly about this, okay? About the fact that when a person has a belief in a higher transcendent reality that is also part of us, right? That in and of itself is a tremendous avenue for healing and mental wellness, okay? Mental health. She's a psychiatrist, a psychologist. I'm not sure. Anyway, additionally, the Rebbe continued to support and endorse his work, even suggesting to other scholars and psychologists that Frankl's work would be a good place to find and forge further connections between the views of psychology and the teachings of Hasidism. What's more, despite the fact that Dr. Frankl rarely engaged in Jewish community in any public way, he became a consistent supporter of Chabad's work in Vienna for the rest of his life. It is clear from, that's the story that I told you, that Chabad used to receive his monthly check, even though Dr. Frankl was married to a non-Jewish woman. He wasn't engaged actively in Jewish life, but yet he had a tremendous debt of gratitude to the Rebbe. It is clear from all of the above stories that ultimately, despite Freud's uncontested influence in the field of secular psychology, the Rebbe felt a kinship toward Dr. Frankl's ideas and approach to healing and motivating the human being to become more human. And it's nice that he says it like that, because that's really what a human is. We're not just like sometimes we talk about ourselves like, oh, we just like, we have all these animalistic tendencies. We're just not, we're just like an animal, right? But no, the truth is the ability to become human is when we identify with the part that is human in us, that soul, right? That is the humanity. It's like, I'm reminded of a discussion that I was having with someone about this whole AI and using ChatGPT and I can't remember if I told you guys, but this whole idea that some of us, I remember my son caught me recently, like having a whole conversation with ChatGPT, and it went like, "Oh, thank you. That's such a great idea." And, "Oh, I so appreciate that. I love it." I'm like, he's reading the thing. He's like, "Ma, you can't talk like that to it. It's a robot." And I'm like, "No, yes, I do talk to it. Like, of course I have to. I'm not doing it for the robot. I'm doing it for myself. I have to be a mensch. Like, we have to continue being mensches, right?" And it was so funny because we were having this discussion on LinkedIn and several people made that point. We don't do it for the robot. We're doing it for ourselves, right? We are mensches, right? So we treat the robot the way we need to be, right? We need to be kind, considerate people. who express appreciation again, right? That means we have to be human. We cannot turn into the robot, right? That is being human. Okay. The Rebbe agreed with Dr. Frankl that each person has the potential to be so much more than just their body and their ego. By activating their inner point of ultimate meaning, that's our soul, a person can escape the quicksand of self-centered obsessions and truly become holy. Beautiful, beautiful. And then chapter 4 is going to continue. I'm going to leave it here because I want to start chapter 4 next week. Chapter 4 is going to continue on this topic, and I kind of gave it a little bit of it, as I told you, the id or the yid. So we'll do that next week. Any stories, any comments, any questions?